After wrapping up my review of the most recent Deadpool and Wolverine film, I decided I wanted to go back and review the two previous films to try and provide some context for how this film and its sequel had built my expectations for the most recent iteration in order to better illustrate how and why that film, namely Deadpool and Wolverine, failed to deliver on what I had come to expect from a Deadpool movie. In short, I wanted to try and prove that my love for the first two films wasn't just me blowing smoke. I really do love the first two Deadpool films, and I think there are a wide range of things to enjoy in them. So after venting my frustration, I wanted to spend some time lavishing praise on what I feel are two far superior films. Thus, this review is going to cover the original Deadpool film from 2016, and then I will be getting to work on a review of the 2018 sequel, Deadpool 2, next. The factor that I will always come back to when I think of this first Deadpool film was how tightly written it was. The story was a rather straightforward revenge plot, but it was told in an interesting and engaging manner that took advantage of shuffling back and forth temporally to better space out the action and drama. It also blended the primary elements, namely action, comedy, drama, and romance, in a seamless way so that each element worked together to bolster the overall narrative. Each of the characters also contributed to the film in a unique way while also serving a worthwhile narrative purpose. All in all, the team that put this film together maximized the use of their $58 million budget to jam all 108 minutes with enjoyable moments that were visually entertaining while also telling a story that was both comedically and emotionally effective. Now I want to take a quick look at the architects of this film before we jump into the review. I know I'm late in figuring this out, but I spent most of my life under the false assumption that the majority of the success or failure of a film fell on the actors and the director. While they are a key ingredient, I'm finally starting to understand that the writers and producers might play an even larger role in many instances, particularly the writers. And I want to incorporate this in case anyone else out there is as unaware as I was at one point. So the first Deadpool film had two primary writers, Rhett Reese, who was credited with providing additional story elements for Disney Pixar's dinosaur movie, not so good, as well as Monsters, Inc. Excellent. Reese was also the script writer for the two Zombieland movies, which are also excellent, as well as G.I. Joe Retaliation, which was poop. Come to think of it, perhaps it was Reese's work on G.I. Joe that created part of the shitstorm that was Channing Tatum playing Gambit in Deadpool and Wolverine. Ugh, just a thought. Long story long, Reese seems to be a bit hit and miss. The second writer was Paul Wernick, who teamed up with Reese on all but the two Disney projects previously mentioned. The takeaway from their history seems to be that they are good action comedy writers because Deadpool and the Zombieland movies do have a lot of functional elements in common, namely the blending of comedy with over-the-top action. Producer-wise, there are three people involved in the first Deadpool film. We have Simon Kinberg, who wrote the Brad Pitt-Angelina Jolie version of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, as well as the script for the first Guy Ritchie-Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movie, which are both enjoyable films. He also stepped in as a producer for Fox Marvel, starting with X-Men 3: The Last Stand, which was a bad jumping-off point. He also produced some other good films, though, such as Chappie, The Martian, and several of the Kenneth Branagh Hercule Poirot, or however the heck you say that Agatha Christie detective guy's name, the mustache guy. The second producer then was Laura Schuler Donner, the wife of the late great Richard Donner, which any lover of comic book adaptations will know as the director of the legendary Christopher Reeve Superman films, or at least the first two as far as I know. Lauren, then, has been part of every Fox X-Men film all the way back to the original in 2000, and her list of hits is, as Goose once put it,
well, the list is long but distinguished.
Yeah, well, so's my Johnson.
The final producer then was Ryan Reynolds himself, which I don't feel needs much investigation. We should all know what that lovable clown has done by now. The final member of the team then to touch on is the director, Tim Miller. Interestingly, and rather sadly, this film might be one of his two broken clock moments. He went on from Deadpool to direct the legendarily horrible Terminator Dark Fate, which bombed like the Enola Gray. Then, hilariously, he was brought on to do reshoots for Borderlands. Good God, the man is like becoming the anti-Midas. Thankfully, though, we got perhaps the best he had to offer in this film. With the groundwork laid, this review is now going to analyze 4 parts of this film. Part 1 will delve into characters, Part 2 will cover humor, Part 3 looks at the action in the film, Part 4 will then examine the overall plot, and finally Part 5 will wrap it all up with some closing thoughts. Each aspect of the film will then be rated on a scale from 1 to 10, and here is a brief breakdown of the verbal representation of that scale. Now, with all that said...
Anyway, I got places to be, a face to fix, and bad guys to kill. Maximum effort.
Part 1. Characters. I'm going to cover what I feel are the two main characters in depth to begin with, namely Ajax, or Francis if you prefer, and Deadpool, and then I will briefly touch on the supporting cast. For the two main characters, I'm going to rate them based on 3 primary criteria: their motivation, execution of their motivation, and characterization. So starting with Francis. Francis is the manager of a workshop that attempts to trigger mutations in human beings by injecting them with a serum that reacts to spikes of adrenaline and then subjecting them to various forms of torture. Francis himself was at one point a patient in the workshop, and his experience triggered a mutation that seared all of his nerve endings so that he no longer feels pain, while also enhancing his strength and reflexes. So the first question about his motivation, namely why is he the way that he is answered the first moment we meet him. He went through immense torture in order to trigger his latent mutation, and his mutation not only caused him to not feel physical pain, but also, according to Francis in this scene, to not feel anything at all. Long story short, it made him physically and emotionally numb, and thus he's capable of inflicting all manner of torture on the people brought into this workshop without compunction. So why is he doing what he's doing? Well, the mutants he's able to create, far from wandering off to become superheroes, are used as henchmen for various nefarious yet profitable endeavors. In other words, they make tools for bad guys to get rich doing bad stuff. Ajax, or Francis, is doing this because he feels nothing, and thus he doesn't care. He's also an incredibly narcissistic megalomaniac. Now, I should be clear that in Francis's claims to feel nothing, what the film is trying to highlight is that he feels no compassion or what might be mistaken for positive emotional sympathy or empathy. He most certainly feels anger, irritation, and a tendency towards vindictiveness when prodded, which prodding is all that Deadpool knows how to do, thus these two do not get along, to say the least. The actor who played Francis, Ed Skrein, noted that his influences for the portrayal of the character were taken from Rutger Hauer's portrayal of the replicant Roy Batty in the original Blade Runner and one of the UK's most notorious serial killers, Harold Shipman. So, an android and a doctor who is rumored to have killed nearly 250 people. This seems to track with the way the character comes off, cold and unfeeling, but definitely sadistic and vengeful when pushed the wrong way. However, so far I've been addressing his base motivation prior to meeting Wade. Once he encounters Wade, the motivation that is important for this film kicks off based on their interactions. Wade irritates Ajax with his ceaseless need to run his mouth, culminating in Wade discovering Ajax's real name. This leads Ajax into placing Wade into an oxygen deprivation tube that triggers Wade's mutation while also forever disfiguring his appearance. Ajax then tells Wade he's capable of fixing the disfiguration of his skin, but that he won't, which launches Wade off on a quest for both revenge on Ajax and to force him to fix his now disfigured skin. In the process, Wade has to mow through a huge portion of Ajax's criminal enterprise to find him. Thus, toward the middle of the second act, and particularly once Ajax realizes that it is Wade, now transformed into his Deadpool alter ego, that has been attacking his operation, Ajax's motivation is primarily to kill Wade. So how does he go about doing this? Ajax goes into a bar where Wade was originally approached for the mutant program and threatens the people there to try and find him. In the process, he finds a picture with Wade and Vanessa, and figuring out that this is a person Wade cares about, he goes off to kidnap her and invites Wade to a showdown. On the one hand, kidnapping Vanessa is a logical move. If you have a psycho messing up your business, this is one method often employed to stop people, hence why the Punisher doesn't like having friends. If you have someone you care about, they can use that person to manipulate you. However, kidnapping her just to invite Wade to a fight, knowing that Wade can't be killed is, well, not really all that bright. Ajax has already stabbed a piece of rebar through Wade's chest and left him in an exploding building. It should be clear enough that killing him is going to be more complicated than a team of goons can handle. Furthermore, it would have made more sense to send a video to Wade with Vanessa in the oxygen tube and telling him to surrender without giving her location. Long story short, while I love the final fight scene, the actual plan is pretty stupid. However, Francis is not portrayed as a particularly bright villain. He's a petty, easily goated psycho, so you don't really expect a character like this to think like a chess player. He's much more the type that would fix an engine by smacking it real hard with a hammer. Thus, his plan, while stupid, does fit with his overall personality. He beat Wade one-on-one once before, and he assumes he can do it again, and getting him into a somewhat vulnerable state just helps tip the scale in his favor a bit more. Finally, for characterization, Ed Skrein did a wonderful job bringing the character to life. Ajax was pompous, arrogant, and outright mean, but also petty and childish, and all this came off in the expressions and the way that he was interacting with Wade. The actor made effective use of facial expressions and tone to flesh out the character, and in the end, what you need in a revenge plot is a villain that the audience loves to hate, and Skrein really did accomplish that. So for motivation, Ajax gets a 7, for execution he gets a 7, and for characterization he also gets a 7. The character was good overall and works really well for this film, but nothing about Ajax is impressive enough to warrant a higher score. Next we have Deadpool. So how did Deadpool get this way? Well, at the chronological start of Wade's story, and I only say it that way because this film is not told in chronological order, Wade was a dishonorably discharged member of Special Forces who turned mercenary. Wade meets a girl, Vanessa, falls in love, and then finds out that he has terminal cancer. After being diagnosed, he is approached by a man working as a recruiter for the workshop run by Ajax and offered the chance to not only have his cancer cured, but also potentially to gain superhuman abilities. Unfortunately, in the process of obtaining a cure and his superhuman powers, his skin was forever disfigured, so now he looks, in the legendary words of Weasel,
"You look like an avocado. Had sex with an older, more disgusting avocado. Yeah. Not gently, like it was hate fucking."
Thus, Wade became this way through the combination of his history with the Special Forces, mercenary work, and the torture Ajax put him through to trigger his powers. This explains his knowledge of guns and the ability to fight, his desire to help people, albeit through rather violent and not strictly wholesome means, and why he is out for revenge. Moving on to why he's doing what he's doing, this is a combination of his hatred for Ajax and his belief that Vanessa, the woman he is in love with, will never accept him in his disfigured state. Furthermore, Ajax told him he was capable of fixing the problem, which also serves as fuel for Deadpool to get his hands on Ajax. Alright, well, how does Deadpool go about addressing this problem? Well, he starts out in the most logical manner one might assume in this situation. He needs to find Ajax, and he doesn't know where he is now that the workshop was blown up, so he goes out looking for Ajax's underlings and works his way through them in a fun little murder spree. This eventually leads Deadpool to the recruiter who initially approached him about joining the Mutant Project, and finally, Ajax, which loops back to the opening of the film. All in all, Deadpool's motivation and execution both get a 9. The film does a great job of laying out who Wade was, who he was becoming with Vanessa, how that is torn down by cancer, and then the drastic step he takes in order to spare Vanessa from having to watch him wither and die while also potentially offering him some hope of a future with her. He does all this to then have that future put into a different kind of jeopardy with what happens in the oxygen deprivation tube. Finally, the route he takes to address the predicament he's put into makes perfect sense. Ajax said he could fix his skin problem, and that is the primary driver for Deadpool because he believes that he needs to fix it in order to be with Vanessa, thus getting a hold of that douchebag is the only logical thing to do. In terms of characterization, Ryan Reynolds was born to play this character. I am of the firm belief that actors work best when they are given characters that are close to their actual personality, thus limiting the necessary range needed in bringing the character to life. My prime example of this would be Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark. The flippantly sarcastic, egotistical playboy that is Tony Stark does not strike me as far from the public persona of Robert Downey Jr., and I always felt like he was playing a version of himself plugged into Doc Brown's amplifier from the opening scene of Back to the Future. In that same vein, Wade and Deadpool for me represent 2 volumes of Ryan Reynolds' actual personality. Wade is Ryan at around 7 or 8 out of 10 on the volume knob, and Deadpool is somewhere around 20, so again, the Flying Marty version. The idea is that Deadpool is a ceaselessly sarcastic motormouth that tends to take jokes 1 or 2 or 10 steps too far and ultimately ends up annoying a large number of people around him. Still, there is an odd charm in his dumbassery. In his Wade form, he has an added level of charm and self-deprecation akin to Reynolds' own celebrity persona that makes him a bit more appealing while adding a certain level of vulnerability into the mix, particularly when it comes to his interactions with Vanessa. He is all bluster and jokes when he puts the suit on, but Vanessa is able to coax the humanity out of him without having to sacrifice the sarcasm. Ryan pulls all of this off quite well in this film. There are countless jokes in the film that he absolutely nails, which I will cover more in part 2, but he is also able to really pull off both the romantic and dramatic bits equally well. For example, the scene in the doctor's office was really well paced, well written, and well acted. Also, the whole scene about the jigsaw puzzle and his connection with Vanessa was also well done. All in all, Ryan did a great job of making the combination of Wade and Deadpool a complete character in this film, which is a large reason why this film was so enjoyable. Alright, so Deadpool gets 9s all around for motivation, execution, and characterization in this film. Finally, I want to briefly touch on the supporting cast. First up is Vanessa. I honestly feel that Marina Baccarin was perhaps the most essential piece to making this film work as well as it did. She is a wonderful actress, which is not to mention how absolutely gorgeous she is, but one of the things I have always admired about her is her ability to really sell emotions with her face, and how much emotional range she has. She is the type of actress that, when she smiles, I always find myself smiling with her. It's absolutely contagious. She is the person I think of when someone says she has a smile that can light up a room. It really and truly is a thing to behold, and it's all in her eyes. She doesn't just smile with her mouth, she smiles with her eyes, and it really does sell the emotion. For the character of Vanessa, interestingly, this is not the first time Morena has played a person who could be classified as a prostitute, depending on your point of view. The other character then being Inara from Firefly. Now, before the Nerd Brigade charges at me, I am fully aware that calling Inara a prostitute is degrading to the character. I'm just trying to point out that saying they were both paid for a form of companionship that usually culminates in sex is, in the words of Obi-Wan, the truth.
From a certain point of view.
A certain point of view?
The more important thing to highlight, though, is that in both instances, Morena brought a lot of depth and complexity to the character, which makes labeling either Inara or Vanessa as just a prostitute reductive. Vanessa was a strong character without being obnoxious, and she served as both a mirror of Wade in terms of humor and sensibilities, or lack thereof, as well as the anchor for his emotional grounding in the film. Vanessa was the heart of the movie, and we needed to like her for that to work. In this film, it absolutely does. She is funny, charismatic, aggressive at times, but also emotional and compassionate. Where Vanessa's character really starts to shine is in the moment when Wade is diagnosed with cancer and she chooses to stay and fight with him when she does not have to. Again, in terms of emotion, you can see the mixture of pain and empathy in her face when she reaches out for him in this scene. This moment began to show that beyond her dirty sense of humor and love of pegging, Vanessa also had a deep moral character, which arises again when she chooses to stay with Wade after discovering what happened to his skin. Vanessa provided this film with so many necessary elements, humor, heart, and an incredible piece of eye candy, and I honestly feel like beyond Deadpool himself, she was probably the most vital element to the success of the overall story. After Vanessa, the remaining supporting cast primarily worked as a variety of backboards for Wade to bounce his ridiculous personality off of, and each one of them gave this film a necessary mixture for different types of jokes. You have Dopender, the goofy love-struck cab driver, who has a twinge of psychotic rage that is only made worse by his meeting with Deadpool. Then there's Weasel, who runs the bar Deadpool took his mercenary jobs from, but Weasel himself is a weakling with a great deadpan delivery that results in a lot of great back and forths between himself and Deadpool. Next, there's Deadpool's roommate, Blind Owl, who Deadpool tasks with assembling IKEA furniture for their apartment, which is a joke that I really love. Then there is Negasonic Teenage Warhead, a broody goth teenage X-Man that Colossus is always dragging along with him, which then also includes Colossus himself. Each of these characters brings a certain level of comedy to the film, but each has their own distinct flavor. Dopender comes off as playful but also a bit dark. Weasel is deadpan and closer to Wade's overall tone, only lacking in backbone. Blind Owl is more mature and somewhat grounded, although she also has a coke habit. Negasonic is the grumpy teenager that Deadpool rightfully corners in one of my favorite jokes of the film. And then finally, Colossus is the direct moral antithesis to Deadpool. Colossus is, in every way, the perfect goody two-shoes Boy Scout that wants Wade to be an X-Man. This helps to really solidify the concept of Wade as an anti-hero, and their interactions are some of the best in the film for establishing Deadpool's moral compass. Colossus provides the outline for what most people think a hero should be and do, and then Wade shits on that in word and deed to provide an alternative to that perspective. Each and every one of these characters was well developed, played key roles in providing variety in the structure of the jokes in the film, and also helped in different ways to support the overall narrative of the film. In short, they were all necessary and effective inclusions in the film, and the actors who brought them to life were also well chosen. Finally, and briefly, we also have Angel Dust. Now, some of you might not know that that was what the character's name was because she had a total of like 2 lines in the whole film. I am referring to Gina Carano's character. Now, I love Gina Carano and I think this character could have been great, but this is the one character I feel like they threw in just for the fight with Colossus. She had next to zero character development. I have no idea who she is, why she is doing what she's doing, nothing. She is just there to be a voiceless henchman, which is sad because Gina deserved better. This was the one supporting character I felt got underserved in this film. But that said, overall, I still give the supporting cast in this film a 9.
You love skee-ball. Apparently more than you love vagina.
It's a tough call.
Part 2. Humor. The brand of humor in the original Deadpool is perhaps the single most prevalent factor that set it apart from the glut of superhero films that preceded it. From the outset of the MCU with Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man in 2008, Marvel had made a name for itself with a tendency towards quippiness, but Deadpool took that idea, fed it a whole bowl full of China White, and really let it rip. The results were refreshing, and it all started with the opening credits. I think the only time I have laughed harder at the opening credits of a film was in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And just an FYI for any of you that have never seen that, that is a thing to experience. They are an absolute wonder to behold, and you will learn quite a bit about moose bites and llamas of all things. That said, I appreciated that the first 2 Deadpool movies, like the Monty Python films, saw the opening credits as another opportunity for entertainment rather than just a bland scroll through of the people responsible for the film, and it also does a wonderful job of setting the comedic tone. The film then manages to maintain that tone throughout, and there are a plethora of bangers in this movie that continue to be funny after multiple viewings. So let's go through some of the greatest hits, starting with Deadpool.
That came out wrong. Or did it?
I'm gonna wait out here, okay? It's a big house. It's funny that I only ever see 2 of you. It's almost like the studio couldn't afford another X-Man. That guy was already up there when I got here.
You ever heard David Beckham speak? It's like he mouth sexed a can of helium. Think Ryan Reynolds got this far on his superior acting method?
You big chrome cock gobbler!
That's not nice.
You really gonna fuck this up for me?
This shit's gonna have nuts in it.
This guy's got the right idea. He wore the brown pants. You're about to be killed by a Zamboni!
Wait, please.
Cockshot! Oh, your poor wife. I'm touching myself tonight.
I bet it feels huge in this hand.
Negasonic Teenage Warhead.
Negasonic Teenage. What the shit?
I'd say that you sound like an infomercial, but not a good one, like Slap Chop. More shake weighty.
Lay down your firearms in exchange for preferential, bordering on gentle, possibly even lover-like treatment. It's just confusing. Is it sexist to hit you? Is it more sexist to not hit you? I mean, the line gets real blurry.
Hashtag drive-by.
I didn't even know sleep. It was pretty much 24/7 ball gags, brownie mix, and clown porn.
Wayne Wilson! What's my name?
Ooh, I'm gonna fucking spell it out for you.
And then win Gita back. The old-fashioned way with your boyish charm. Kidnap her. I've never said this, but don't swallow. Time to make the chimmy fucking chongas. Someone's not counting. 6.
The beauty of this film, though, was that, as I highlighted in the supporting cast section, Deadpool wasn't the only one that drew laughs. Vanessa was funny.
Thanks, Dickless. And I mean you. 3 minutes.
Deal. What do we do with the remaining 2 minutes, 37 seconds?
Cuddle?
You best apologize before... Yeah. That.
Say the magic words, Fat Gandalf.
Dopinder provided some laughs.
He's tied up in the trunk. I'm doing, as you said, DP. I plan to gut him like a tandoori fish, then dump his carcass on Geeta's doorstep. Who brought this twinkly man? He is as dishonorable as he is attractive. That was Bandhu in the trunk.
Blind Owl got in a few good ones as well.
God, I miss cocaine.
I wish I never heard of Craigslist.
Salsa water and lemon for blood. Or wear red. Dumbass.
And so did Colossus.
Please, how's blowing up Bill's character? Quite unfortunate.
Finish fucking her the fuck up!
Language, please!
Suck a cock!
Oh! You're on the left. The way we... Why?
Then Negasonic had a few.
Zip it, Sinead.
Hey, douche pool. There's a stupid.
Ripley from Alien 3.
Fuck, you're old.
And this last one of hers might just be me. I don't know what it is, but seeing her laugh like this always gets a chuckle out of me. And finally, Weasel and his interactions with Wade were some of the best in the film.
Haunting. Your face is the stuff of nightmares.
Like a testicle with teeth.
You will die alone. That's the shit emoji. You know, it's the turd with the smiling face and the eyes. I thought it was chocolate yogurt for so long. Star in your own horror films. Because you look like Freddy Krueger face fuck a topographical map of Utah. Wait. I'd go with you, but I don't want to.
Again, what really struck me about this film is the variety of comedic angles they took through the different supporting characters. Each of them had their funny moments, and they didn't all sound like Deadpool. Deadpool's whole shtick was unique in and of itself, and the rest of them were able to provide other forms of comedic relief without turning into Deadpool, which is something that happened far too many times in Deadpool and Wolverine. Overall, the humor in this film gets a 9. It was refreshingly irreverent and set itself apart not only from the other Marvel films, but all of the other superhero films. It was consistently funny and didn't rely too heavily on the meta humor of the current cultural moment, thus the majority of the jokes will still be funny down the road because they don't require familiarity with the cultural context in which the film was made. Furthermore, the comedy didn't detract from the drama or action, but worked well in tandem with it. This film, amazingly, was able to weave all of these moments together in a perfect blending that gave the film a truly unique charm.
Bad Deadpool.
7. Good Deadpool.
Part 3. Action. The action in this film was both unique for a Marvel film in terms of violence and gore, but also in terms of their creative use of acrobatics combined with slow motion. Furthermore, outside of the fight between Colossus and Angel Dust, all of the fights were narratively relevant in a way that many recent Marvel films are not. What I mean by that is that as the MCU progressed, it became more and more obvious that the goal of every film was to work its way to a massive CGI orgasm at the end. And it didn't seem to matter at times if it made any sense how we got there, because finishing on those CGI clusterfucks would cause many people to be so wowed by the pretty lights that they weren't paying attention to why people were fighting, who they were actually fighting, or that so much of the film prior to that moment was absolute dog shit. Deadpool then gives you one tiny morsel of that in the Colossus vs. Angel Dust fight. Colossus as the moralistic antithesis to Deadpool in the narrative was excellent, and he was a stellar addition for that reason. However, we needed him to fight something, so we made up a villain who has a total of perhaps 2 lines in the whole film that could take punches from him. It's sad really because it seems pretty obvious that they were banking on Gina Carano's history with MMA to make the fight look pretty cool, but there isn't much real purpose to that fight other than the staple CGI flashy flash that Marvel loves so much. Now, I have bitched and moaned about that one little tiny thing because it is literally the only thing that you could possibly hold against the action in this film, and even then, it's a minor annoyance at worst. This film had 4 primary extended fight scenes, and I appreciated how they varied the balance of tension, drama, and comedy for each so that they stood apart from each other in subtle ways. Furthermore, as I was alluding to previously, each of these fights served a clear narrative purpose. First, we have the highway fight, which carried over into multiple scenes in the film. There are so many things to praise in this scene. The first bit is the way in which they used the car at the outset of the fight. Wade using the cigarette lighter in the car, kicking that dude out the door, flipping himself around and pressing the gas with his hand, steering the car with his foot. They made excellent use of limited space, and the choreography in this bit was really fun to watch. It then gets even better with the 12 bullets sequence. The creativity here between thinking up how each villain would be taken out in different and interesting ways, and then combining that with some cool acrobatics and the slow motion shots of each shell as they were expended was ingenious. Furthermore, they were able to combine these nice action shots with comedic moments that made it even more entertaining. All in all, action-wise, this is one of my favorite Marvel sequences, and it set the tone for the film really well. The second main action scene took place in Ajax's workshop after Wade blew up the oxygen tube he was trapped in. This scene shifted the emotional barometer towards straight action and drama, unlike the other scenes, and it really ramped up the tension. Deadpool wasn't making jokes at this point, and it makes perfect sense given all the circumstances leading up to it. I also liked that this fight felt more primal. Deadpool and Ajax aren't fighting at their best, and it feels more desperate than the other fights, which again provides a different tone and atmosphere. The fight was short but well executed, and the ending of the fight helps build on the antagonistic relationship between Wade and Ajax. When Ajax leans in and delivers his taunt, it really ramps up that feeling of wanting to see this dude get put in his place. Thus, the fight was both well executed and a nice tonal shift. The third action sequence, which was the montage of killing Ajax's underlings in an effort to locate him, really ramped up the comedic elements. In my mind, for the highway scene, the action knob was set to 10 and the comedy was set to about 8 or 9. In this montage bit, the action was turned to about 8 or 9 and the comedy was set to 10. Both scenes give you a bit of both, but it felt like this sequence was trying harder to be funny, and it absolutely worked. We get a nice narrative progression here as well for how Deadpool made his suit, and a wonderful variety of takedowns that were all hilarious in their own ways. The Zamboni bit was priceless. I loved the back and forth with the 2 women that he gets into with, and then you have the rambling in different languages at one point. It was a nice blending of the 2 primary elements of the film, namely action and comedy, and it helped move the plot along as well. Finally, we have the last showdown with Ajax on the aircraft carrier. The movie pushes on with the running bit of Deadpool always showing up to a fight having forgotten some vital part of his arsenal, and in this fight he's left with just his 2 swords. In so many films they might have just had him rush in using swords in a gunfight because, cool, but I appreciated that this film actually gave us a goofy narrative beat that was not only funny, but also consistent with the highway fight where he forgot his ammo bag. So there are a couple bits to dissect here. First, Deadpool on the ground taking out the mostly nameless, faceless, gun-toting henchman. I say mostly because I don't want to disrespect Bob, agent of Hydra. The choreography here was great as well, similar in execution to the highway fight stuff and fun to watch. Then we have Colossus vs. Angel Dust, which I already talked about in terms of narrative relevance. However, visually, there were some cool moments here. I particularly liked the bit where Angel Dust gets Colossus in an armbar and he just picks her up and slams her into the car repeatedly, which was shades of Hulk and Loki. Then we have the 3 Negasonic booms. I really liked the first 2, the third one is visually nice as well, but we do have to bear in mind that this choice makes everything go absolutely foobar. I mean, she could have literally killed everyone with that choice there. I mean, it's fun to watch, but be more careful there next time, kiddo. Finally, there is the best part of the scene, which is the fight between Deadpool and Ajax. This was also really well put together, and I think the combination of the axe throw, catch, throw is one of my favorite bits in the whole film. I'm not a professional fight choreography analyst, but the use of the axes and the swords looked really cool to my untrained eye. I also liked that Vanessa got to help out by stabbing Ajax with the sword, and that she was brave enough to grab a freaking sword by the blade with her hands to get out. I mean, I get that that would have likely taken her fingers off, but I appreciate that they didn't make her a weak damsel waiting for someone else to do something. All in all, the action in this film was visually well put together, used a lot of different creative techniques to add something new, such as the numbering bit with the shell casings during the highway fight, and their ability to shift the balance of comedy, action, and dramatic tension across the different fights as well. Furthermore, each of the fights were narratively relevant. To put them in what would be chronological order, the fight in the fire between DP and Ajax is the real kickoff of their blood feud. The montage of killing Ajax's underlings helps move the plot forward to the highway fight, which all of that then is in service of finding Ajax. And finally we have the fight at the end to both save Vanessa and bring a resolution to the conflict between Deadpool and Ajax. Thus, the action in this film gets a 10. It was excellent.
About to do to you what Limp Bizkit did to music in the late 90s. Dad?
Part 4. Plot. I will break down my review of the plot for Deadpool by the 3 acts in the film. I am still getting used to recognizing act breaks, and this is one that was a bit more difficult because of the flashbacks, so forgive me if I get this wrong. I'm doing my best here. That said, here we go. Act 1. We open with the credits rolling into Deadpool in the taxi, and then the opening of the highway fight. We cut to the flashback that sets up Wade as a mercenary, he meets Vanessa, and then we get a montage of their sexy time romance build up that culminates in him asking her to marry him, and then learning that he has cancer. The act ends with Wade deciding to leave in the hopes of the mutant workshop being able to cure him of that cancer. This act gets a 9. Flashbacks are a tricky thing to do right, but this film nailed it. It also made the pacing of the film work a bit more effectively. They start off with a high energy scene before moving into the setup portion, thus they grab your attention from the outset before shifting into the building blocks of the story. If they had started from the chronological beginning and run in order, we wouldn't have had an action scene until the fight in the fire, and it might have dragged the pace of the film down. Thus, the strategic use of flashbacks here was a good choice. Furthermore, we get a well-told setup of who Wade is, who Vanessa is, how the relationship developed, why he had to leave, and what then turned him into Deadpool. Thus, we get a tightly written setup for 2 of the essential characters of the film that perfectly lays the groundwork for their motivations moving forward. Act 2. The wheel of torture begins, we get a cut to more interaction with Colossus, and eventually Wade's mutation triggers, he blows up the oxygen tube, fights Ajax in the fire, and then we cut back to the end of the highway set piece where Ajax escapes, and then DP cuts off his hand to get away from Colossus. This act also gets a 9. The tone of the mutant workshop and the interaction between Wade and Ajax develops into both a dramatically satisfying and comedically satisfying antagonistic relationship that builds with each exchange between the two. For a film built around a revenge plot, it is important for the audience to hate the antagonist as much as the hero does, and to really want to see the antagonist get their comeuppance, and this film does that well. Particularly right after Ajax stabs the rebar through Deadpool and gives him this line.
What's my name?
Then we get the wonderful callback just before the final fight.
Wade Wilson! What's my name?
Ooh, I'm gonna fucking spell it out for you.
The exchanges between Colossus and Wade then also serve to delineate his stance on being a hero and what he thinks about it, and also provide some comedic moments to balance out the drama of the mutant workshop section. All in all, the pacing was good, the narrative beats worked to build on the plot, and the character development was also good. Finally, Act 3. Wade returns home after losing Ajax and his hand. Ajax returns to his base of operations, gets fixed up, and then takes Angel Dust with him to the Sister Margaret bar to locate Wade, and they find a picture with Vanessa and decide to kidnap her. Wade and Weasel go off to the strip club Vanessa is working at to warn her, but Wade can't bring himself to face her, and Ajax succeeds in abducting her. Ajax then sends Wade a text inviting him to a fight. Wade recruits Colossus and Negasonic to accompany him to the fight, and we get the final big battle. Wade shoots Ajax in the head, tells Colossus he'll look out for the other 4 hero moments, and then has to reveal his face to Vanessa. Vanessa, being the awesome person she is, says that she can get used to the new face, and we get a happy ending. This act gets an 8. Overall, it was good. There are some great comedic bits in the apartment, especially the bit with Wade's tiny hand, and I love Wade's reaction to finding out that Ajax was going after Vanessa. However, Ajax's whole plan is just kind of dumb. I mean, why that spot? Why the aircraft carrier? Of all the places to pick, why there? Why kidnap Vanessa and just hang out there? Why not try and manipulate the situation a bit more in your favor now that you have her? I mean, in the end, I like the scene, but you just have to accept that Ajax was a bit of a one-dimensional character and written to be very juvenile, which works well with Wade, but it's also a bit overly brain-dead as a plan. Also, I mean, again, the choice of location, while providing a nice environment for fight choreography, just makes no sense. I mean, why there? There's no logic to it. Why would you choose that spot of all places? And they don't really talk about it. It's just, well, we have a broken down aircraft carrier. So yeah, that's where we're just going to do that. Thus, I have to knock it down a bit for that. It's a good overall act, but that part I have come to notice a bit more each time I watch it. Ajax really had the upper hand and did nothing with it. Also, we have the gratuitous Colossus versus Angel Dust thing that I already moaned about. Still, the rest of the fight was quite good, so I'm going to stop complaining so people don't get mad at me. The rest of that whole scene and that act was quite good. There were a lot of great comedic moments, particularly the spelling out of Francis's names with the bodies and the dude whose bare ass is sticking up in the air, and the fact that Deadpool used a decapitated head as the dot for the eye. I mean, there's lots of really good stuff in this scene and in this act. Also, Morena had another great character moment with this line.
What better way to crawl back inside that head of yours?
Oh, you never left.
But you did, asshole!
Which really sells the hurt and anger. Finally, the resolution of the relationship between Wade and Vanessa was also well done. They maintained consistency with how they built Vanessa as someone similar to Wade in their sensibilities, but also someone with a deep enough moral character to not abandon someone she loved even when they've been diagnosed with terminal cancer. They also kept their banter up, which helped to make the scene feel more believable. She didn't just jump right in and forgive him. They went through the progressive steps to earn the final resolution instead of rushing in like so many films do. All in all, it was a really good act with a few wonky bits that honestly are me just being nitpicky. So that said, Act 1 got a 9, Act 2 got a 9, and Act 3 got an 8, for a total score of 8.6.
You ever hear of the one-legged man in the ass-kicking contest?
Do you have off switch?
Yeah, it's right next to the prostate. Or is that the on switch?
Part 5. Final score and closing thoughts. The first Deadpool film is a truly enjoyable movie experience that offers a nice balance of over-the-top humor, action, drama, and romance. It really is amazing going back to watch it years later and realizing how tightly written the script was, because there are no points at which it feels like the film is beginning to drag. With a 1 hour and 30-minute runtime, each moment feels important, and the production team really made good use of flashbacks to balance out the high and low tension moments to make sure that the pacing was well balanced as well. The characters in the film were also generally great. The only potential weaknesses in that area might be that Ajax was a little one-dimensional and didn't progress or change at all throughout the film, and the almost complete lack of dialogue for Angel Dust made it impossible to feel much for her as a character unless you just inherently love Gina Carano, which I do, but this could have been better. Outside of those two small points, the rest of the cast and the character development in this film was great. Deadpool and Wade, while technically the same person, did have distinct differences, and both versions were charming for different reasons. Vanessa was a well-fleshed-out character, and the film and the actress both do a superb job of developing her into someone you cared about. Furthermore, the chemistry between Vanessa and Wade was excellent, which was essential for selling both the romantic plot and the climactic point of conflict when Vanessa is abducted. Finally, all the supporting characters had distinct characteristics that added interesting comedic elements so that the film wasn't just Deadpool making his outlandish one-liners, but a kind of wild mix of different tones and angles to bounce the jokes off of. The humor of this film was also refreshingly absurd and consistently funny. Again, partially owing to the various supporting characters and allowing each of them to be uniquely funny in their own right. Then there was the action, which was truly excellent. The choreography was well thought out, and I truly appreciate the creative use of slow motion and acrobatics. Finally, the plot was also consistent, logical, and worked toward an emotional and dramatic conclusion that made sense with the character development throughout the film. All in all, this was a great film that I feel has been underappreciated and honestly taken for granted even by people who do enjoy it. I have often seen it reduced down to a simple stabby ha-ha film with dirty jokes and lots of violence, but I think this movie is much more than that. This film is effective at the action and comedy bits, which is true, but this film also had a heart and earned its emotional payoff through effective character development, and I hope more people can start to appreciate the various levels at which this film was able to succeed. So many films suffer from only being able to operate on one level. But the original Deadpool managed to pull off being effective comedically, dramatically, romantically, and as an action film, and that is a rare thing nowadays. So, that brings me to the final score. The final score for Deadpool 1 breaks down like this. Ajax got a 7, Deadpool got a 9, the supporting cast got a 9, the humor got a 9, the action got a 10, the plot got an 8.6, and that brings us to a final score of 8.8. And with that brings me to the end of my review for the 2016 Deadpool film. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please smash that like button, and if you are so inclined, drop me a comment to let me know what you think. I am still new to YouTube as well, so any and all suggestions are appreciated as well. So until next time, always remember,
I'm touching myself tonight.